Hi, welcome back to season 4 of the Tummy Team Journey. I am Kelly Dean, physical therapist and founder of the Tummy Team, and I'm your host. This is the podcast where we talk about how investing in your functional core and pelvic floor strength can actually change your life. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Tummy Team Journey podcast. I am joined today with my friend and colleague, Megan Miller. She's a physical therapist, a pelvic floor physical therapist in Pennsylvania, and we collaborate a lot together. She's done some training with the Tummy Team, our professional training courses, but also comes and helps me when I teach courses, when we travel around and teach courses to other PTs and OTs. Megan's with me a lot of the time. And we have a cool topic talking about core and pelvic floor dysfunction with kids. And Megan has a ton of experience in this area. So thank you for joining me again, Megan. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, Kelly. Thanks so much for having me. Always fun to be here and have conversations. So I'm excited about this one, as all of them, but I always am happy to talk about core and pelvic floor as it relates to kids. So thanks for having me.
Well, when, like I mentioned, we do a lot of where we're together the most is when we're training PTs and OTs that are working with senior citizens, the
Mhm.
elderly, people in skilled nursing facilities that are dealing with, a lot of those things. And we have some podcasts about seniors, but in a lot of those discussions, you've shared some cool things that you see with kids and with children. And I work with kids, well, basically with parents of kids more than with kids. When I
Mhm.
was in my clinic, I did have an occasional client that was adolescent or younger. We have a tummy team toddler course, which is helps parents deal with like some of the core dysfunction things that can be happening with babies and toddlers, especially with diastasis recti, which we'll talk about
Mhm.
later. But there's so much more. And I get a ton of questions about as people are doing this work for themselves, a lot of our clients are parents. And then they
Mhm.
start seeing like things that they thought maybe were common or they thought were normal, but they're actually common and not normal, or
Mhm.
they felt like were not quite right with their kids, but have been a little bit dismissed by their doctor or they've tried to get some help. And so they often come to me because I'm a trusted source with a lot of questions. And sometimes I go to you because you have a lot more experience in the clinic with kids. So why don't we just start with you talking a little bit about how you started working with kids, um, and kind of the ages of the kids that you see, kind of how that all came about, and then we can drift into like what types of things that we see that a pelvic floor PT, or in my case a core rehab PT,
Mhm.
would see in kids. So let's start
Yeah.
there.
Okay. That sounds great. Well, similar to you, Kelly. So I've been a PT since 1997. I've been doing pelvic floor and core work since 1999. So a long time. I've been working with adults for all of that time. And I really started working with kids about 12-ish years ago.
Mhm.
The practice where I was working at the time, we were seeing a lot of adults with core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And this practice was starting to get some referrals for kids. And because I was there and I was kind of the youngest therapist there and I had 3 young kids at the time, they kind of said, "Well, let's have Megan see the kids." And which was great.
Yeah.
But really there are a lot of similarities in treating kids and adults with core and pelvic floor issues, but there's some differences too. And so it kind of led me down a path, and I went and took a lot of extra coursework in working with kids specifically at that time, and just really love it. You and I have talked about this before, that I really feel like there's a role for core and pelvic floor work across the whole lifespan. So I have clients on my schedule literally from age 5 to age 95, which I think is so great.
Yeah.
So in that sort of like kindergarten, starting to be school age range, that's when like a lot of kind of toileting issues that maybe were kind of starting to be noticed in potty training years, like really kind of come out into the light, kind of when kids get to school all day for the first time on their own. So like that season, there's a lot of needs and kids that I work with in that time frame. There's a role kind of like for like teenagers. So like I see work with like some girls who are going through painful period issues and pelvic pain. Sometimes I work with girls like who have difficulty like inserting tampons and have a lot of like pelvic tension issues, so there's like a role there. I work with like good handful of like teenagers who are still dealing with bedwetting issues. So and then of course it just goes through the lifespan, but even within kids there's a diversity of like issues that can come up where this work can be really so valuable. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I've been doing it for about with kids specifically for about the last 12 years. So in my practice now, I really see a mix of kids and adults. And so some of I guess, the most common issues that maybe kids would come in to see me for,
Yeah.
probably number one would be constipation. So chronic constipation. And then sort of in that realm, kind of going hand in
You
hand.
define what is considered chronic constipation. I was with a bunch of professionals the other day, and we were talking about like, when is it considered constipation? Like,
Right, right.
because sometimes even with babies, sometimes they'll go a week without pooping, and new parents are freaking
Mhm,
out, right? And then some
mhm.
doctors are like, it's not really constipation until they go 10 days. Or other doctors are like, it's not really constipation until, unless it's 4 days, or whatever. But you go from little babies that are pooping like every time you nurse them to like not pooping for
Right,
2 days if
right,
it's concerning. And I know it's
right.
different, maybe it's different, at different stages. So what would you define as chronic constipation for people that are listening?
So, yeah, so I think like the official, criteria, like normal bowel movement frequency is like no less than once every 3 days. But really, I think and there's variability to that depending on the person, of course. Um, I mean, I think in general, like probably the majority of people feel better when they're having a bowel movement every day. But that's not, technically there's some leeway there to
Yeah.
technically, officially define constipation. But it's interesting in kids because um, kids can poop every day and have like sort of a normal quote unquote looking poop and go every day and can still be constipated, which is so deceiving and tricky to sort through. But sometimes kids are going, but they're not emptying, all the way. So you really have to look at sort of the whole picture of what's going on for that child or that person to really figure out.
I think
um
it's actually,
yeah.
not uncommon for adults too, that
Oh
they
yeah.
don't fully empty. Some of us, like, wanna get in and out of the bathroom real quick, they're not patient enough, they don't have good potty posture, good technique, or they have a weak core pelvic floor, there's some things going on that are keeping it so that's, like, the slow backup that causes other problems that we're going to talk about.
Right.
But yeah, I thought like I knew you were going to say constipation, not because you told me, but because that's a big key to what I see too. Like with core stuff, it's with kids, especially the littler kids. It's constipation.
Mhm.
They're not pooping well. They're not pooping effectively. Um, and it's causing a lot of other problems, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And really even in infants. I mean, even in infants, like if they're not, if they're going like once every 7 days, or even if they're going every other day, but
Mhm.
they're in a lot of distress with,
Yeah.
like,
They're straining.
abdominal pain and straining and, really difficult to evacuate. Like, you can really even see the signs of it in infancy.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, so generally, like in my clinic, one of the questions I get often is like, well, how old should they be to come in and, do some of this work? And
Mhm.
my sort of general answer is I if they usually around age 4 and up, like, is I think a really good time for the kids to kind of actively start working on some of this, but certainly younger than that, with a lot of like parent support and teaching parents interventions to do with them when they're younger is really
100%.
valuable as well. Yeah. Yeah. So,
100%. Like, obviously, I have a toddler course. No toddlers are logging into my
right.
website, right?
Right.
Right? It's for the parents
Right.
to empower the parents because, we're the ones with the crying baby
Mhm.
or the kids that are, like, up all night or in the bathroom for hours, and don't, like, hold their poop until they get home from school because it takes too long
Mhm.
in the bathroom at school, and now we have another problem because now they held
Mhm.
for so long. All those things. It's the parents that are like in it. And if we can educate and empower them to help,
Mhm.
like it's really they're the front line resource, right? And
Oh,
our job
absolutely.
help them, not necessarily make them the therapist, but allow them to be the parent in a way that they're feeling effective in this area.
Oh, absolutely. And in kids who are kind of old enough to have this dialogue, I'll explain to them, it's kind of like we're all on a team, right? Like, you're coming to me and I'm going to help you with this problem. We're going to figure out some strategies, some exercises to help this,
Mhm.
toileting issue get a lot better. And your mom and your dad are on the team and they're going to bring you to the appointments and they're going to help you kind of make sure you're doing some of this stuff at home. And so
Mhm.
really kind of making it that everybody has a role.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so constipation for sure is probably the primary issue that people come in with. And then kind of stemming from that, I see a lot of kids with encopresis, which is the leakage of stool that happens when you have constipation, which
Okay.
feels counterintuitive to people as in terms of how could you be constipated but then be leaking stool. And
Right.
so what happens is in kids who have chronic constipation, so they're not, having bowel movements as frequently, or when they are going, they're not emptying completely. So when they're not emptying completely, stool kind of then sits in their rectum for longer periods of time, right? And so if that's happening over a number of months, sometimes over a number of years, the
Mm,
rectum, which is the end kind of part of our colon, kind of where the poop ends up before we get a message in our brain that it's time to evacuate. If it's kind of building up and building up, never really emptying completely, that rectum gets really stretched out. And as I explain it to kids, the poop factory never closes. So you're continuing to eat and, continuing to drink. And so, I talk to them a lot about like, what is poop? It's really the part of food that our body doesn't need or can't use. And then when we eat, our stomach and our small intestine kind of take what it needs out of the food, like all the good vitamins and minerals and all of that, and helps us food gives us energy to do all the things that we want to do. And then the part that our body doesn't need gets processed down through our GI tract where it gets turned into poop. And then we talk about how it travels all through the belly and, ends up at the end part of our colon, which is the rectum. So when new poop is continuing to be formed and we have this old poop kind of sitting in the rectum, the new poop kind of like slides around this massive poop that's still sitting there in the rectum and it leaks out. And typically when this is happening, kids can't feel that. They're not aware of it. And it's just kind of happening through the day. It can be just like very minor, like skid marks to
mhm.
like actual, stool that's leaking out in different amounts during the day. And it's really baffling to parents because you think, how could they not feel this? Or so there's a lot of like confusion around that. But really, when that rectum gets so stretched out, they
Yeah.
lose a lot of sensory
Yeah.
feedback. And so they really can't
The rectum's not
feel,
functioning the way it used to
no,
anymore.
no,
It's like a
like a,
stretched out sock, you
yes,
know?
or yeah, or like a stretched out, like deflated balloon. And
Yeah. So it has
it
no
can't,
function.
right, it can't contract to kind of push the stool out, and the sensory, nerve function has
Yeah.
changed. So that's a common scenario that I see. Kind of going then
What
along with,
do you see that? You see that all across the spectrum of ages, or is that usually that
um,
school, kindergarten age?
I would say it's anywhere like 5 to 12 is sort of like a common age range that I would see that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it certainly can happen, older than that too, but that primarily that like 5 to 12 age range is where I typically see people with that.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, going along with that, then we can kind of have another issue on top of that, which is also really common in kids with constipation and caprices, which is bedwetting. So again, when we have this rectum that is overstretched and not emptying and doesn't have good sensory or motor function, um, your rectum really sits very close to the bladder. So if we constantly have all this pressure really close to the bladder, it actually kind of compresses the bladder a bit. And
Mhm.
then that creates all this kind of nerve irritation with the nerves that are innervating the bladder and making it work. And it's not allowing the bladder to fill up to its normal capacity, especially during nighttime hours. So constipation is a huge cause of bedwetting. So that often the constipation, the stool leakage, and the bedwetting often are sort of like a trifecta of issues that people can have.
And I remember when you shared that with me, I you were the first person that ever connected those dots for me, and it was so eye-opening. Like, after you told me, I was like, "Oh, yeah." And we, like, can see how that impacts our seniors as well, because a lot of them are constipated,
Mhm,
'cause the medication's
mhm,
and they're not drinking it as much for lots of reasons, and they're not as active, and then they're having nighttime incontinence, uh,
mhm.
more often than they have daytime incontinence, and
Right.
so that was a real eye-opening, like, revelation that you connected those dots, and it was surprising to me, that, you know, I had never heard that before. I had never put those
Mhm.
things together. And, do you think that that's common knowledge, in the medical world? Is that pretty common knowledge with bedwetting? Or do they is that am I just out of the loop?
No, I think it's becoming, I don't think it always was, but I think it's becoming a bit more and more, kind of recognized. Like, often I feel like more so in the last couple of years, if I have a child that's referred from, say, a pediatrician, they're already kind of on that path of thinking about constipation and managing. So, but that has definitely evolved, certainly in the last,
Yeah,
year or two, I would say, from what I've seen. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and then
they
I
maybe
think,
thought they were too he's constipated and he's bedwetting. Oh, it's like a you know,
right, two
yeah,
different things. Right.
different things.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So in kids who have both of those issues going on, you really can't address the bedwetting issue until all the daytime stuff is really doing much better. So once you're on, a better bowel schedule and you're emptying and you've, improved the stool leakage during the day, um, that's kind of when you can then start addressing the bedwetting. But it's very, very hard to make improvements with
Yeah,
bedwetting until the constipation piece
yeah,
is addressed. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a major
Yeah.
cause. It's kind of like just, treating a symptom without the cause.
Right.
One of the
Right.
main causes of that. Um, I have so many questions, that I think people are also thinking. So, like, I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell people. So when when the rectum gets stretched out to that capacity, and it's no longer functioning like a rectum, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and it's causing all of these other symptoms. How do kids come back from that? Like, how does that what is the capacity for that to heal? Like, we could talk a little bit about, in general terms, like the process that we go through to help them, but I
Mhm.
think that I wanna kinda jump ahead to give people that hope that,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Oh,
important.
absolutely. That it can improve and then it can heal. Absolutely. So it's really a combination, as with many things. A lot of the work that I do is really focused on getting the muscle function of how we have bowel movements, really, and how we use our core and pelvic floor to be the most efficient that it can be, to help kids with, you know, being able to use their pelvic floor and their core in the best way to empty their bowel most
Yeah,
effectively. So I'll talk a little bit about more about the details of that in a minute. But so that's a big part. And then the other big part is that if they're in that scenario with that overstretched rectum, they really do need to be on some sort of bowel program, kind of with guidance from their pediatrician, from their GI doctor, on some type of laxative regimen to kind of help that rectum to heal
get
because the rectum, yeah,
blockage out.
yes,
Yeah,
to get the blockage out and to actually restore some, like, contractile property to the rectum itself. So, usually, it's kind of a combination of things, and every kid is different, and that's why, it's very individualized. But sort of like some of the common, um medications or supplements that people might use to address this with physician guidance
mhm,
would be possibly Miralax, possibly like a stimulant laxative, so something like Senna,
mhm,
possibly magnesium,
mhm.
possibly a type of like supplemental fiber. So
Yeah,
it really depends on the person and the symptoms, of course, and coming up with a strategic plan to really make sure that we're getting the poop to the best consistency that we can to help it move through the GI tract and then help the rectum to contract and do what it needs to do to help empty. And then our piece is to help the muscle function to support all of that. So
yeah,
it's a multifaceted approach. Usually, when kids have that very overstretched rectum, constipation, leakage, it really can take anywhere from, like, 6 months to a year of not that you're gonna have to do all of the things for all of that time, but it can take some
there's
level of intervention in a, step down fashion for, like, 6 months to a year, to kinda get that rectum to restore its normal tone and function. So it's not a quick fix, but it absolutely can be healed,
yeah.
with the right guidance. Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
it's so important for people to hear. I know that, when my kids were little and when I was in, like, around a lot of, friends that had kids that were little, there was a lot of, we there was a feeling that, doctors would just like, "Okay, well, we'll just put them on Miralax." And that
Mhm.
felt like a very negative, like, "Okay, well, now,
Mhm.
like, is now they're gonna have to be on Miralax or they're gonna have to be on a laxative to poop forever?" But I think explaining to people that, when things have kind of gone to such an amount of blockage, we have to kind of break that down and get things moving. And then there's a gradual weaning back to normalize not needing that. This is not a
Right.
permanent. It's not the only part of the solution, and it's not the permanent solution. It's a temporary process to restore some function and get the poop out.
Yeah.
Do you
Oh,
ever
absolutely.
do they ever have to get to a point where have you ever had, conditions where they have to have an enema or something more?
Oh, yes, yes, I'm glad you said that. So, yes, that is another way, a big way, another great way to approach this is that sometimes, doing regular enemas is an approach that kids can use and parents can help them with, to really help with that rectum emptying. So,
Yeah.
you know, some kids that's going to work for, some kids that's going to be more challenging. It depends on the person, but that is a very enemas are a very effective way, to help with that restoring that rectal function and tone
Yeah.
for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
it's just like I always tell people, like, think about when you're pregnant. Your belly is not going to come back while the baby's still in there, right?
right,
Like,
right,
it's not,
right,
and then when the baby comes out, it's still gonna take a little while for all those muscles to get back or get to some form of shape that you had before, right?
right,
Things got
right.
straightened out, but it does happen, you know?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
so
And that's the thing, whether you're doing enemas, whether you're doing Miralax, whether you're doing Senate, like whatever combination, the goal is that it's not like this is what you're taking and this is what it is forever. There should be a very thoughtful like titration and weaning down of that as the rectum heals and as the emptying ability gets better, there should be less and less of that. So it's something that you're always like I'm always discussing with the parents of kids that I work with, like I want the kids to be what I call poop detectives, so to try to like see what the poop is looking like, see what the amount is, and based on what they're seeing and the emptying ability, we have to have a like sort of an ongoing conversation about how we don't with physician guidance, but how do we
mhm.
titrate that down as we go to match where they're at. So it should never be sort of a static this is what you're on forever. There should be just a gradual progression of that.
And with kids, do you, give them the Bristol stool scale to
Yes.
look at? Yeah, I
Yes,
bet
and I
your
have
kids
yes.
really love that to some extent,
Yes.
like,
Yes, and I have a very fun, like, kids version of it, and I give everybody a copy, and I say, "Tape this up in the bathroom, like, hang it up in the bathroom, and then you can be the poop
all your
detective," and
guests all your guests
yes.
get to learn a little bit
Yes.
about the poop.
Yes. Yes, it's a good conversation, but it really the poop chart is I mean, and again, the one I have is kind of like a fun kid-oriented one, and, but it really is a good talking point, like, between the kids and their parents, because
Yeah,
once kids are potty trained, like, as parents, we sort of lose a little bit of touch of what's happening in the bathroom, so, with something like this issue with constipation, with, stool leakage, with
mhm,
bladder leakage, like we kind of need to have some information on a like a daily basis about what's happening.
yeah.
So, the kids
Normalizes the conversation. It normalizes,
totally. Yeah.
like the book, Everybody Poops, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
everybody poops, so it's just it's a normal part of our daily life, and it does tell us about our health and our
Right.
well-being,
Right.
and it opens up that dialogue. So as funny as it is about, like, having that in the bathroom when they have a sleepover, it's like, well, what's your poop look like?
Right. Right.
But but it is actually super valuable,
It
um,
is. Yeah.
and to, like, destigmatize it basically
Mhm.
so that they
Mhm.
know. Um, I'm gonna share a little bit about my like, what I do with constipation stuff, because
Yeah.
what a lot of, the kids or the parents that I see, these are, babies and toddlers. This is while they're
Mhm.
potty training, when they don't wanna get out of the
Mhm.
diaper.
Mhm.
They only wanna poop in their diaper because they're scared of the toilet, or
Right.
there's
Right.
all kinds of reasons, right? All kinds of reasons that we don't always know because the toddler is not really telling us.
Right.
We can't figure out. I feel like, some of the work that I do, hopefully prevents it from getting to the point where, it
Mhm.
is later, because, I do talk to them about doing some abdominal massage, and, like, the finger walk abdominal massage, and having it be a part of their daily
Mhm.
routine, like, even as babies, doing a little, massage with the baby before bedtime or when they're gassy, and kind of, pumping their legs a little bit, all that stuff to help the
Mhm.
gas get out, but also to really stimulate the digestive tract. A lot of the kids that are the babies and toddlers that I'm seeing have a diastasis or a distended abdominal wall
Mhm.
for multitude of reasons. Some of it's low tone, some of it's a chronic um, compensation that they learned because of a digestive issue when they were
Mhm.
in the early development, or chronic coughing that happened, like they had some kind of respiratory issue, or they were very colicky right when the diastasis should have been naturally closing. It didn't, and so now their belly is they strain to sit up, and they strain to pull up, and they're using the strategy to push out. So a lot
Yep.
of what I'm doing is trying to get them to use their core. How do you get a baby to use their
Mhm.
core? But, like, some of it is massaging. We do have these little tiny splints that those kids love so much. Um,
Mhm.
it's like a little weighted blanket for them. It gives them a lot of
Mhm.
grounding because when their core is not stabilizing them, they feel dysregulated, neurologically
Mhm.
dysregulated, so they're more fussy,
Mhm.
more irritable, they're,
Mhm.
they're less active because they don't have that stabilizing force. And then how we do some blowing things, we do some potty posture stuff, which I'm sure you're gonna talk
Mhm.
about. So, we're blowing as they go and how they're
Mhm.
sitting, like, I prefer the little kids to have the little potty, not the on the toilet
Yep. Yep,
because
I
of how it
agree.
positions their legs in that
Mhm.
squatty potty position. And
Mhm.
if they are gonna put them on the toilet, then they need to have a seat that they don't feel like they're falling in, and they need
Mhm.
to have, a squatty potty bench, like like a elevated one so their legs are up
Mhm.
in that, you know, in that,
Right.
that pelvic angle that we want to open
Mhm.
up the pelvis. And
Yep.
so, these are some things that even just as they're getting, like, they're noticing that their baby struggles a little bit with digestion or with some food things, maybe has some allergies or some intolerances or gassy, whatever is going on. Everybody's different. They have different reasons why that's happening. Like, helping them as a parent to comfort them and guide them and help them poop better, and then, trying to, in a really positive way, address pottying that makes the babies and the toddlers a little bit more successful.
Mhm.
And hopefully in that way, the parents are also learning that this is going to help them have a better evacuation, like a better full emptying of their bowels if they're
Mhm.
in more of that squatted position. Sometimes kids are on the go, they don't want to sit on the toilet. So how can we
Mhm.
make, taking their time on the toilet fun, but
Mhm.
also productive, So
Right.
those are
Right.
kind of things that I do, and I'm sure you do them at the next level because the kids are a little bit more independent somewhat, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and those are all fantastic strategies, and I think, kids who are showing signs of core weakness, of digestive issues, of constipation, like, having that intervention, like, in those toddler years, I think could make a tremendous difference,
Yeah.
tremendous. So, I
But like
think
you said,
that's
once they're potty trained, they were like, maybe they don't go very often, but they're at least out of diapers." But then
right.
it kinda
Yeah.
escalates, right?
It does, it really does, and then when they get to school for kind of the first time all day on their own, and they're kind of in charge of deciding, like, "I'm going to go use the bathroom," there's just so many layers of barriers that can happen,
Mhm.
and if they're already kind of on the edge of having some issues, that
Yeah.
scenario can really kinda tip them over the edge with that, for sure, and it can be all kinds of things, kids are afraid that they're gonna miss something in class, so they don't want to they don't wanna leave because 'cause they're afraid they're gonna miss an assignment or some of the work, or they're afraid, they're embarrassed to ask to go. They don't wanna, stand out in front of their classmates or, sometimes I mean, at schools, this is maybe, like, more middle school, high school, hopefully, but,
Mhm.
not hopefully, but just as a fact, sometimes the bathrooms themselves are not conducive to being somewhere that you wanna sit down and take your time and empty your bowel or your bladder. Just from, like, the cleanliness standpoint, sometimes, unfortunately, there's,
Space.
like, privacy issues. It can be a place where, potentially bullying, like, there can just be a whole host of reasons why kids just don't
And even
want
even
to
little
take the
kids when
time. Yeah.
they're younger, like, even just the clothing management,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
we
yeah.
think that they can do it, but we don't realize how much we're helping them when they're at home, or how much
Mhm.
it's okay if they aren't fully dressed when they come out of the bathroom, and that's not what they wanna do at
Right,
school, you
right,
know?
right, right.
Um, yeah, I can see how that all builds up,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yep, yep. So there's a lot of different reasons. So so and I guess the other, I didn't mention this, but the other sort of really common issue that I might work with kids on would be bladder, like urinary daytime leakage during the day. So in addition to bedwetting, so that's sort of the other big common issue that I help people with.
And what
So
do you see that with? Is that similar to what we see in adults, like stress or urge incontinence, or is it a little bit different?
It there it there are some similarities, there can be some differences. So some kids will experience, like, bladder leakage with, you know, coughing, with jumping off the swings on the playground, like, with impact, so more of that stress incontinence. And then I see some kids that do have more of, like, an urgency component where, they kinda don't maybe always notice the signals in the right timing of when their bladder is full, and they kind of wait till the last second, and then it kind of becomes this urgency issue, and then that can kind of snowball from there. So
Mhm.
really some of each. So kind of like adults, kind of
Yes.
some of each for different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so when kids come in, I try to tell the parents my goal is to make it as fun as possible. Because Kelly, you and I talk about peeing and pooping and all this all the time, and I have to remind myself sometimes that not everybody does that.
Very few other people do that.
Yeah. So, I have to reset myself so I really try to meet kids and parents where they're at with
Yeah.
this and sort of match that, as we always do. But a lot of, like, the first time that they come in, I do lots and lots of, like, very fun educating about how our body works, like how our GI tract works, how our bladder functions. I talk to them about, all the different places we have muscles in our body. And I'll say, did you know that we have muscles actually in our body that help us with peeing and pooping? And that's what I do, is I love to help friends figure out how to get those muscles functioning as well as we can so that we can help people who are having pooping problems or peeing problems. So I try to make it very empowering to them at their level.
And I bet you it's really I bet you the parents are soaking it up too, because parents don't know either. Like, we
Right.
all need to be educated.
Right.
So, but I love I mean, I have some kids that I work with, and the parents are always fascinated at how much I am talking directly to the kid, you
Yes,
know?
yes.
I'm
Mhm.
talking to this
Yeah,
kid. I know the parent's listening, but I'm
right.
talking to the kid because
Yes.
this is their body, and I want
Mhm.
them to feel empowered because what we're gonna ask them to do, they have to do most of the time.
Right,
So,
right.
and when they're at school and when they're in their sports and when they're, when they're not with their friends and, all the things. So they have to buy in, and I also, when they come back, I give them complete permission to be 100% honest,
Mhm,
did you do?
mhm.
What didn't you do? Why didn't you do it? You just forgot. Okay. Or, like, what's the real reason, so that I can help navigate that,
Mhm.
because there might be legitimate reasons. And I think that sometimes as parents, I know that I do this as a parent. I'm just like, oh, why didn't you do that thing?
Right.
There's a reason.
Right,
There's a
right,
reason.
right,
Like,
right,
let's
right, right.
figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and you say this a lot, Kelly, and I 100% agree that, like, a big part of our job is helping people to be successful with some of the
Yeah.
strategies and the exercises that we give them. So that is, that goes for kids too. And so if they're having a hard time, following through with some of the things that we're talking about, like I really try to get into the nitty-gritty of, like you were just saying, like, well, how come, let's figure out why couldn't this happen, or what could we make different that you
Yeah.
could
Pieces.
work on these couple things at this time during the day, and really try to get down to the minutia of their day and
Yeah.
talk through, like, let's talk this through and see when could this work to do this. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. So anyway, lots of education about, how the body works, and to kind of go off of what you were just saying too, so many times I'm talking directly to the kids about all of this. The parents, of course, are there and listening and kind of filling in some blanks. But so many times I've had moms say, well, I think I'm just going to do this too with you. And
Yes, as you should.
so yeah, so that's kind of neat, but
Yeah.
um so
Yeah.
yeah, and then I have a lot of fun things in my office, like water balloons and like pretend poop and like stretchy balls to
Yeah.
show people kind of how, what we're kind of aiming for with breathing and how the pelvic floor muscles work. So lots of like really fun ways to kind of get those messages across about how, the core and pelvic floor muscles in particular, like, have this really important job of in our body of like helping us, like really support our digestive tract, help us like kind of hold pee and poop in when we need that to happen,
Right.
and they help us to kind of help it come out when that needs to happen, and there's a place for both, a time and place for both of those things. So we really need our muscles to be able to help us do both of those things really well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then, depending on the child, depending on why they're coming in, then there's like a whole host of things that we might do. Usually there's some very, I say, fun but purposeful exercises that maybe we'll start, like kind of right
Mhm.
off the bat with, just kind of starting to kind of get some core connection and strength rolling and initiated. Sometimes exercises to kind of help with like pelvic floor, maybe hip like relaxation. Like kids who do a lot of like holding during the day, and they go through their whole day, and they don't want to take time to use the bathroom, so they've held it all day. That holding really perpetuates like pelvic floor tension and tightness. So then
Yeah.
when they do sit to have a bowel movement, sometimes it's really hard to kind of reverse that then. So
Well, it's like I
yeah,
tell people, it's like if you have your hand in a fist all day long, it is really hard, I mean, to open
yes.
it up. And
Yes.
you have to open it up to let things out, and this is, I mean, same with childbirth, but same with a lot of different things, right? In that our body, tight muscles are not strong muscles, they're desperate
Right.
muscles, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
so, and I imagine it's not just their pelvic floor, I imagine it's their inner thighs, their glutes,
Mhm.
all of those
Yes.
muscles all around their pelvis are all
Yes.
tight.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like figuring out how do we get those muscles, and those muscles really do support our and are so connected with our deeper pelvic floor muscles. So how do we kind of introduce some relaxation and mobility and flexibility into those muscles, and how do we really help our deeper core muscles to have more strength and more connection and more coordination. So kind of working on both of those things at, simultaneously. So some fun, purposeful exercises to work on all of that. um,
Yeah.
and then we might do, a lot of times we'll do abdominal massage. A lot of times I'll have kids, if they have like big exercise balls at home, like a yoga ball,
Mhm.
or even like a big, maybe like a really big playground ball, had to be a pretty big one, but and depending on their size, but having them kind of lay on their belly on the ball and doing some like rolling back and forth, doing some like belly circles on the ball so that that's a way that they can actually do some of the belly massage to themselves, which is kind of cool. And then they get some like proprioceptive feedback just from the sensation of laying on the ball on their belly, which is kind of nice. Certainly some abdominal massage techniques. I do a little bit of in my clinic. I do a little bit of biofeedback. It's not the only thing I do, but I kind of layer that into some other things. So just for anybody listening, so biofeedback.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, but so biofeedback is it's a non-invasive way to kind of look at you can use it for any muscle in the body, but we use it a lot for pelvic floor issues. But it's a way that the person using it can sort of quote unquote see how their muscles are functioning. So we use little tiny sensors that we put externally kind of over the pelvic floor muscles. We connect those sensors to some wiring, which connects to a laptop. And then we practice a little bit of contracting, but more so relaxing the pelvic floor. And then the kids can actually see on the computer screen sort of like a graphic representation of their muscle activity. So, as you always say too, Kelly, like it's really hard to change the function of a muscle that we can't feel, that we can't see, that we don't know is there. These muscles are challenging for adults to think about. So for kids to think about, there's even another layer to that. So I explain to them like if the biofeedback is something we're going to do, I explain to them it's kind of like playing a video game with your muscles. Like you get to control what's happening on the screen with your muscles. So it's not for everybody. I don't do it with everybody, but for some people, it can be a really
Right, and
helpful
it could be
tool.
really a cool component of, like, them being able to visually see these really delicate muscles, and honestly, when you've been holding something tight for so long, you don't even know you're holding it tight anymore. Like,
Mhm,
it just
mhm,
it feels like that's how it's supposed to function, and, the other thing I always say is tight muscles are tight for a reason, right? They're
mhm,
doing a
mhm,
and so releasing them has to be intentional with replacing the strength and stability and the
right,
function that
right,
they're doing, right?
right, right.
So I think um I think this is why I love doing this podcast because I see all of the little pieces that we do are all fairly simple pieces, but
Mhm,
the the knowledge of knowing what to do when and how to
mhm,
combine it and what to wean off while you're starting something else, that type of expertise is what really helps people be successful. Because I
mhm,
think it'd be easy to go, "Okay, well, my kiddo, is struggling with this. I'm gonna do some abdominal massage, and I'm gonna get a squatty potty, and, I'm gonna do these things," which, yes, but
mhm,
you may also need a little bit of guidance. You may need a little bit of support along the way. Um,
mhm.
and I mean, we've only touched on basically constipation and what always happens to you. But we both know that constipation is the root of, for me, core dysfunction and diastasis
Mhm,
stuff,
mhm,
the bedwetting and some of the other incontinence stuff and urine stuff and the leakage of stool that we're seeing. So these are
mhm,
all some of the most common things we see, and they're all tied to constipation.
mhm,
And so I think it's important that that's what we've kind of shared the most about. I feel like I would love to do another podcast where we talk a little bit more about the older age kids, like the
mhm, mhm,
athletes. I think the
mhm,
athletes, the things related to menstrual cycle for the teenager
mhm,
girls, the
mhm,
postural stuff that we see in teenagers and stuff. I think that would be another really great episode to do. But when we are seeing this, kind of younger age, the constipation related stuff, what are some like we talked about some things that they could do. Like we also want to give them a couple of resources.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think the resource that of even just being able to talk about your poop, um,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, like I would love
Yeah.
for you to share um the poop page that you have. Uh,
Totally, totally.
and we can add that to the resources for people. Um,
Absolutely.
but also like, are there some other things off the top of your head that you can, kind of have people like even just where would they start if they feel like their kids are struggling? Like obviously we need them to see a doctor. But beyond
Right, right, right. So, in terms of, like, where do you start? So discussing it with pediatrician, with, if you have a GI physician, usually they do if constipation is the issue, usually they start with some type of X-ray to really see, like an abdominal X-ray to really see, like, the extent of, the amount of stool that's in the colon and that's in the rectum specifically. So that piece is really helpful to know if your child has like an abdominal x-ray to diagnose constipation. You really want to have them tell you what the rectal diameter is on the x-ray. That's not always something that they give you in the standard report, but that really is helpful to know, in terms of the rectal distension. That's really a helpful piece. So that's in terms of medical, that's a really helpful first place to start.
Mhm,
In terms of like, what could we do from a behavioral
mhm,
therapy intervention standpoint? So, I think, if they're, meeting with you, Kelly, looking at your toddler course, doing an e-session,
mhm.
um, if there's a pediatric, pelvic floor PT in your area, that can be a great starting point. Um, but I think it's really, really helpful to know that there is a path forward, that it's not I think people get stuck in sort of this, like, carousel of, like, trying different things, and like, if it doesn't work relatively soon, they kinda stop that and try something else, and then that constipation carousel kinda continues and continues. So, knowing that, kind of finding your way to the right guidance, there is absolutely a path forward
Yeah.
for healing of this. Yes, absolutely. So, and in terms of, like, things at home, like you said, having when they sit on the toilet, having their feet on the stool, doing some of the abdominal massage, um, being thoughtful about, like, if it's more of a bladder issue, like really encouraging sort of regular voiding during the day, which when you're not with them during the day, that can be challenging. So, looking at things like a potty watch, like they actually make watches that you can get on Amazon that you can program to vibrate every 2 hour. You can set it to whatever frequency you want so that it reminds the child when, to kind of do a check-in and see if they need to use the bathroom. So something like that can be helpful. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of yeah, and like you said, that just creating an atmosphere where there can be some open conversation about some of this is hugely helpful in all of this for sure.
And I think I personally feel like it can be challenging to find a pelvic floor PT that works with kids. I think it's rare. And I think that most listeners might struggle in that area. So we talked about this before. Megan does do online consultations and sessions with people just like I do. So, a lot of times just having somebody that sees a lot of this to talk to and to talk you through and explain some things, to hear your story, to kind of do a little bit of a evaluation even though we're doing it from a distance. There's a
Mhm.
lot of things that we see consistently over and over, and we know the questions to ask, and we know what the answers mean when you answer those questions.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
don't feel like, if you don't have somebody near you, that you can't reach out to one of us. And in the show notes, I'll also have how you can get on Megan's schedule, or, or on my schedule. Megan has definitely much more expertise than I do on a lot of, this age that we talked about today, and strategies. I have some expertise on the littler area.
Mhm.
But I think I want people to know that, um, like we said, pelvic floor and core issues. I mean, we all have the same body, whether it's a little tiny body or an old body,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of similarities, but how we approach it is going to look different. And the obstacles are different with kids.
Mhm.
So we need
Mhm.
to be aware of those obstacles, um, you know, not be like totally derailed by them. Like it's not a roadblock, it's just another obstacle that we need to navigate, and how we navigate that. And a lot of it is just starting the dialogue, talking about what's normal, what's not normal, and how we can slowly make a step by step, multi, plan, or,
Mhm.
to get people feeling
Mhm.
better, and
Mhm.
not struggling long term with this, because it does
Yeah.
it's every aspect of their lives and of the parents' lives,
Yes,
right?
I've seen it. I've seen these issues create lots and lots of, like, family distress, which is understandable. It can affect, outings that you go on and vacations that you plan, and so it
Kids don't
really.
want school,
Right,
they don't wanna
right,
go to school anymore, or they miss a lot of school, and then you're
right,
missing work,
right.
and it creates a lot of anxiety and stress that then also makes kids more constipated.
Correct. Yes. Correct.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's part of it. So if we can help anybody with that, I would love to do that. Um, and we'll do another episode where we talk more about some of the additional stuff that we see. But I feel like this was whenever me and Megan start a conversation, we're all like, well, we'll see how far we get. But
I
but
think we got to the first paragraph of our our notes, but it was good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like when we talk, we constantly realize how much the people that are listening don't know this information, and
Mhm.
we want to help you with that. So, part of the Tummy Team Journey podcast is that journey that we're all on to be strong for the life we're meant to live, to have the functional core and pelvic floor strength that we need to live our best life. And being able to poop and pee as a kid is part of doing that, and having our kids be able to do that,
Mhm.
makes our life better too. So that's what we want,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to share my email, Kelly, if you want to put that in the show notes. If people have questions, I'm happy to, feel free to reach out to me with any questions, and I'm happy to help if I can.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. I think I'm like, I'm not gonna give my email, but, we will give you guys a way to reach out to us, and to, like, there are ways to do, like, I have a 15-minute free phone consult. There's things like that that we can do, to talk you through stuff, because I know it's very discerning, and we really do want to help. And not every person that's listening to our podcast has kids or has kids with this issue,
Mhm.
but maybe you know somebody that does. And if we can help, spread a little hope and encouragement, we'd love to do that. So please share this podcast with people that you think it might be valuable for. Okay. Anything you want to
Absolutely.
add before we sign off?
I don't think so. I think we covered a good points. So I'm just I echo your thoughts, and, like, really just getting the word out that there is hope, there's encouragement, there are
Yeah.
absolutely steps you can take, to help your child, your grandchild make improvements with
Yeah.
these issues, which are so hugely impactful on quality of life, just like they are at any age, but just in a different way. Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, thank you for joining me, and we will definitely have more with Megan. And thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Tummy Team Journey. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Tummy Team Journey. We would love to help you restore your core and be strong for the life you were meant to live. You can get more practical strategies at thetummyteam.com, and we'll see you next time.